Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call together the September 26, 2024 school committee meeting. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this evening we have our consent agenda posted, the minutes from September 12, 2024 meeting, as well as the bills and payroll. Is there a motion to accept? Motion made by Stacy. Seconded by Elaine. This will be a roll call vote because we have Bino joining us virtually this evening. Stacy?
Stacy Nurse, yes.
Bino?
Bino, yes.
Great. Elaine?
Aye.
Jean
Wood, yes.
And Justin McCarthy votes yes as well. All right, we take care of that piece of business. Thank you. So first opportunity for interested citizens. So if we have anyone in the room or on Zoom that would like to speak before the school committee, now's your first chance. It'll be a second chance at the end of the meeting.
We do not.
Okay, we'll close that portion of the meeting. We'll move on to recognition. So this evening we have Raquel Rodriguez joining us for our, we'll give a report of the events for each of our 4 schools. Take it away.
Thank you for having me. So for Shaker Lane's principal and assistant principal have begun their monthly diversity readings in their classrooms. The first book they have selected is called It's Okay to Be Different by Sharon Perkill. And classroom teachers can sign up to have Ms. Kane and Ms. Deacon read a different book each month on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Shaker Lane's fall book fair will also be taking place on October 7th, and they hope that families will take advantage of this great event. For Russell Street, they had their back to school night last week, where the teachers presented all the exciting learning opportunities the students will have this year. Many of the classes have been starting to take place in the think tank to work with Ms. McGregor on using MakerBot to design 3D personalized keychains. Russell Street students have started earning their stripes as well. Students who have shown safety, taking responsibility, respect, integrity, perseverance, and empathy will be displayed on the bulletin board in the main foyer seat. For the middle school, the map testing occurred yesterday on Wednesday, and makeups will be in the days soon to come. And the first kids' night out is on October 18th, and there will be more details on that shortly. Then finally, for the high school, despite the rain, the boys lacrosse yard sale fundraiser on Saturday was a huge success. On Tuesday, the high school hosted their senior college planning night for parents. Fall Plan Day is an all-student written and performed show in one afternoon, and that will take place this Saturday. The National Honor Society will run a fundraiser at Anthony's Pizza to benefit the Alzheimer's Association on October 4th, so make sure to support a great cause. The Unified Basketball has begun and will have a home game against Groton Dunstable on October 10th. And finally, college visits have officially begun and will be running all through November.
Thank you very much. Great update. Any questions for Raquel? I think she covered everything.
Yeah.
That's great. Good job. Thanks so much. All right, next up, we have a Special Olympics update. So Unified Champion Schools, Principal John Harrington will recognize LHS.
Hi, everyone. Happy to once again come before you to celebrate a special recognition from the Special Olympics in Massachusetts. Littleton High School is once again recognized by the Special Olympics Massachusetts as a 2023-2024 Unified Champion School. That's the certificate. And it says, thank you for your school's commitment to fostering a socially inclusive school climate that emphasizes acceptance, respect, and human dignity for all students. And then hashtag choose to include. So it's a nice recognition. I want to give a special thank you to Tracy Turner and our special education teacher, Eric Arnold, who have really been instrumental in keeping this program riding at Littleton High School. And a special shout out to our student athletes, typical students who are partners for our special participants. Thank you very much. It's nice to celebrate.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Okay. And then we have other listed, which I'm going to make the assumption that Superintendent Clenchey has some other recognition.
Always.
Okay. I was right again.
Just one though.
Yeah.
Just one. So I'd like to acknowledge Mrs. Steele, Principal Kane, Principal McDonald, the ELA implementation team, and the K-5 ELA teachers for their commitment to implementing the new reading curriculum at Sugar Lane. That's it, and Russell Street School. It's a heavy lift. It's a huge change from what they've been doing before. A lot of work has been put into this, and we're seeing differences already. It's not even the end of September, and they're they're taking the time, and it's a tremendous amount of time to shift what you've been doing for many years if you're an experienced teacher. And to see the results this quickly is really powerful for me as a superintendent. So congratulations to all of the teachers and administrators that are involved. We're looking forward to a smooth implementation process, and it's not going to happen overnight, but to see changes as quickly is really promising.
Very good.
I'm really excited to hear that. Is it possible in a future meeting to hear more about the program and more about these good results that you've started to preview? Yeah, I looked it up online, I have to say, and it was, I have a lot of questions about, such interest. It's like a knowledge-based program instead of
knowledge building.
knowledge building, and like what great opportunities to connect it with science and social studies, and but it does seem like a big mindset shift for teachers from the previous program. So I'd love to hear about how you're managing that, but
It does
some future meeting.
It does a tremendous job interweaving science and social studies
Yeah.
into their units. Like
Yeah, I mean, it'd be
I'm
great
ready.
to find out, like, if it aligns with the science and social studies standards, like, it would be great to elevate those opportunities.
Some does,
Yeah,
some are repeated, kind of, right, the social studies standards might be taught in grade 4, but the topic is repeated in PLA in grade 5, which is, never a bad thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's perfectly aligned, and other times it's
Yeah.
not exactly, but it works.
no, it looks like a great choice. I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah, awesome.
Great. All right, we'll move into the meat and potatoes portion of the evening. We've got 2 presentations scheduled. The first up is a map update. And before we get there, I'll just read the how tonight's agenda ties back to the strategic plan. I think this is an awesome change we made as a school committee. Elaine, thank you very much. So tonight's presentation, it's the alignment to the district strategic plan standard 1, curriculum instruction assessment. Align and enhance curriculum instruction and assessment to continually improve student achievement. The essential question for this evening, what the school committee is listening for, is how does map data inform instructional practices for the 2024-2025 school year? Take it away, Steele.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we will answer that by the end of the presentation.
Okay.
For sure. So math growth for this year. Tonight's presentation has 5 major components to it. And so we'll start at kind of going back to the beginning of what is math growth. Then we'll look at the scoring of how it is scored, because it is unique in that way. We'll look at our actual data, what the data says. And then we will go into how we use the data, which is really going to hit upon the question for this evening. And then we'll share some takeaways from looking at the data and conversations that we've had. So that's our roadmap for this evening's presentation. So starting up with what is math growth? So the math growth assessments measure what students know and informs what they're ready to learn next. So it's unique in that way that it's designed to try and have students know about 50% of the assessment. So they're not going to know answers to 50% of the assessment. And the reason for that is to try and figure out where the student is, what they know already, and where they're ready to learn next, what they're ready to learn as the next component. And so next slide, please. Thank you. So it is an interim assessment that we do 3 times a year. We do it in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. And as it was mentioned, I think Raquel mentioned during her report, we are currently in math growth testing season. And so that window is open until October 4th. So our students are doing the fall assessment at the moment. It is an adaptive assessment. And so what that means, it's very different than a standardized assessment, that it adapts to student responses, right? So a standardized assessment is every single person in the room gets the exact same assessment, the same questions. It doesn't matter how they answer it.
whereas the adaptive assessment is going to respond to the student's response. So if you look at the chart that's up there on the screen on the bottom right, you will see this is one person responding, right? So they start and they get the first question correct. So it's a green check. So the test is going to provide a slightly more challenging question to that individual. We can see another green check. So they got that second question correct. So again, it's going to push the student a little bit further to see what they already know. That third question, the student did not get correct. So then it's going to try and level back. Okay, where are we, right? So provide a slightly easier question, got that one wrong. Slightly easier, got that one wrong. So you see on the left side of the graph, the chart, it's a bit steeper, the ups and downs, and eventually by the end of the assessment, it's trying to level itself out to know exactly where the student is. And so that the report that gets run at the end is pinpointing the specific skills that the student has achieved, has proficiency on, and the skills that the student is ready to learn next. And so that is the way that it is an adaptive assessment. Math Growth is also unique because it is a grade level independent assessment. So it does not matter what grade level you are in, it's going to ask you standards progressively more difficult to see where you are at. So you could be a student in third grade that is really advancing within the standards and end up getting some third grade questions because you're finding out where you fall within your knowledge at that point in time. The assessment is also linked to our state learning standards. Let's see. The Math Growth assessments provide valid longitudinal data based on an equal interval scale, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And it demonstrates this growth over time. So the chart that you see there on the top of the screen, it shows one student progress over a couple of years, right? So 3 of the circles are for one academic year, and then the next starts the next year. And so we can see students over their time with us in LPS over several years and see their growth going beyond just 1 or 2 years, but all the way through if they've taken it all the way through with us. It does provide real-time data on student mastery and achievement on, like we said, standards-based content. It identifies the instructional level for each student, independent of whatever grade they are in, currently enrolled. And it does link to instruction, to learning targets, and to interventions. And we will talk about that specifically when we talk about how we use the data and how it relates to interventions and the standards. A couple other items to know about Math Growth is that the test is untimed, technically. However, it should take students about 45 to 55 or an hour to take the assessment. It is a piece of information, right? It is one data point. It's nice because it is a live data point that we get quick feedback on, as opposed to other standardized tests such as MCAS that takes months for us to get the reports back. It allows us to really meet the student where they are. So the student can take the assessment, and then the very next day or week, I'm getting support in what I've identified as needing support in, which is helpful. And just what you'll see as we progress through, but we have our students in grades 2 through 8 take reading and math, and students in grade 9 strictly take reading only. So now moving on to how Math Growth is scored. It is an assessment that measures student achievement and growth. We really focus on the growth to make sure our students are learning at an average pace where we would typically like to see them growing. It does use the RIT scale, and so you'll see RIT score. RIT is always what we call it. That's the RASH unit, and so it's an equal interval scale, just like feet and inches on a ruler, right? And so it doesn't necessarily matter how old you are. Everyone grows at their own rate, right? And so you don't have to be 5 years old and be a certain spot on the the growth chart. There's norms, which is what we have with Math Growth. But everyone grows at their own pace, and it's the same idea here. And so the scale that's where we really stress that the scale is not grade level dependent. It's based on how you perform and where you were at previously and where you go next. The RIT scores typically range from about 100 to 300. And so those are the numbers that you will typically see and that we'll see this evening. The NWEA, which is the organization that facilitates the math growth exams, put out norms. It was last normed in 2020, right before the pandemic. So these are pre-pandemic norms, which is also then very interesting when you compare pandemic scores to pre-pandemic norms. And so we'll see the impacts that that has had over the years. The NWEA, recently I just attended a webinar, and they are hoping, and their goal is to come out with 2025 norms. They are slightly hesitant because their results at the national level are not catching up to pre-pandemic times. And so they're afraid of reducing the scores of the norms. And so they're doing a lot of thinking and consideration of whether to come out with the 2025 norms and how to come out with them with proper consideration of the educational world that we're in. For tonight's intents and purposes, we're using the 2020 norms as they are listed here for you. So let's dive into the actual data. There are two major ways to look at the data, and we're going to look at both of those ways tonight. The first is that we're going to look at growth over one academic year and compare the growth of that grade level to the same grade level for the previous 2 years. So we're looking at a total of 3 years from the same grade level. This is really helpful to be able to see like typically where we fall within a grade level. But you do have to take it with a grain of salt because you're comparing 3 different cohorts, right? So we're comparing apples to oranges. And we know that every cohort has its own unique personality and skill set and growth at which they go. So our first set of data, we're going to look at this. So we're looking strictly at grade levels going across not different cohorts is what we're going to look at. So the chart here that you see, it's for Shaker Lane. So it's grade 2 where we start assessing using map growth. The left side of the chart has the grade and the subject matter. And then we have a few columns that end up being repeated. And so we have the fall 21 to spring 22 mean Brit scores for our students and their observed growth within that one academic year. And then that is repeated for the 22-23 school year, and then most recently the 23-24 school year. The far right column, I put in there the norms, so we don't have to constantly go back to that norms chart. It's listed there for us. So you can see here that we have, for all of them, I'll say it once, and I'll try not to repeat myself, but we're above the national norm at every grade level. Which is really great and impressive, and you're going to see that consistently moving across. We do have strong growth overall in grade 2, specifically in math. And so what's nice to see if we look at grade 2 math, 21-22, they ended the year at 200.5 RIT score. In 23, they ended the year at 203.1. In 24, 206.4. So we have a really nice growth coming out of the pandemic with regards to our math scores. Something to notice as we continue on is that the scores are some of the highest, or with regards to math, the highest that we've had in math since the pandemic in all of the grade levels. So since the pandemic, our math scores are the highest they've been. Some of the grade levels are even back to pre-pandemic scores with regards to math, and I will point those out for us when we get to them.
Can I ask a quick question before you move to another slide? So when you're looking at a grade level that has different cohorts passing through it, does this data tell you, I mean, it's not going to tell you about individual students because it's different students, but do you use this to evaluate your curriculum and instruction instead of the students themselves?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is more big picture for us of, are we kind of typically staying within our norm area? And even pre-pandemic to now, we're within points a lot of times. And so that is for us, like I look at this as like programming, and we'll get to that, where some of this data to me is indicating our new K-5 math program is showing success.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And so we can see that here. Starting in grade 2, our new math program started in the fall of 2022 in our classrooms, And so we're gonna see, even just looking at the observed growth from last year and the 23-24 academic year is higher. And you're gonna see significant growth within math, which to us is an indicator that the new math program, our students are seeing success in that program, which is great. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Russell Street School, again, you'll see that exact same thing, Elaine, of what you were just asking, is that the programmatically looking at this, my eyes automatically, because I was curious about our math and the Into Math program, if you look at the results of the observed growth, they're really great when it comes to the math. And so programmatically, that's good for us to know, to see that data. Again, overall, you see very strong growth in math in grades 3 through 5. All 3 grade levels at Russell Street are not only the highest since the pandemic, but also they surpassed pre-pandemic scores. So in grade 3, they surpassed by about 4 points from pre-pandemic. When I'm saying pre-pandemic, I'm referring to the 2 full school years before the pandemic hit. So I'm talking about school years 17-18 and 18-19. And so our students in grade 3 were about 4 points above pre-pandemic. Grade 4, they were 4.5 points above pre-pandemic. And in grade 5, a little bit closer, but 0.4 points above pre-pandemic scores, which is an amazing amount of work to our students and our staff to get the math learning, to accelerate the math learning to where it is, which is great. As we go up in grade levels, typically what we end up seeing is that less significant growth. And so on one hand, this makes the math observed growth quite impressive, right? So 17.5 in grade 4, 12.7 in grade 5. That's significant observed growth in one academic year. On the other hand, we want to make sure that our students are still making strides, right? And so when we're looking specifically at their reading, right? While our students are starting the academic year above the end of the national norm. So for example, what I mean by that is if we look at grade 3 reading, the fall of 2023, our students on average, their average rate was a 198. The national norm is that students end grade 3 at 197.12. So our students are entering above the national norm of the end of the year. They're still making growth, right? Which is great. It's an area when you start to realize the amazing significant growth in math, that's an area for us to focus on and to work on, which is why we have looked at our reading programming and have adopted a new program to try and make sure that we're supporting all students with their reading and having have access to the reading that they should have. The next slide, please, Steve. Going on to the middle school. Again, you see some strong growth in math. Grade 6 is just like grades 3, 4, and 5. So they did have 2 previous years, their 4th and 5th grade year, they had the Into Math program. And just like 3, 4, and 5, they surpassed their pre-pandemic scores by 1.5 points, again, which is very impressive. And like in other cases that we just demonstrated or that I just pointed out to you, they're starting the year above the end of the year norm in most cases. And so our students are coming in with some pretty significant skill sets. And so that's why we talk about using this really for the growth factor of seeing are our students growing, as opposed to just making sure they're hitting that national norm. And then finally, we have the high school. And the high school is an interesting because high school started reading for math as a result of the pandemic, actually. So it was brought in during the pandemic as a way to see how are our students doing? Are there major gaps that we need to be filling? And so it was brought in for that reason. So we have no pre-pandemic scores to compare to, but also it was a tool for us to make sure what do we need to kind of target and hit based on the past educational experiences with regards to ELA that our students have had. So again, typically, this is our oldest grade that does it. We don't see a ton of significant growth within the grade 9 reading. However, what it is helpful for is identifying individual areas of growth for our students and individual areas of need. And so a teacher can run the report and see that a student might have mastered a particular area but has a significant need in another. And so that's not going to come up in this data here, but it comes up at that granular student level data that our teachers can run. That is comparing apples to oranges, right? So one way to look at the data, we look at it big picture to kind of see how we are, how we've been, and where we're headed. The next set of slides talks, completely flips it, and it compares apples to apples. So now we start looking at cohorts of students over several years and their growth on the MAP assessment over their time with us in LPS. And so for this, we're following the class of 2027. So they're currently our sophomores. And you can see all the way back from second grade when they were in 2016, 2017 in second grade, their growth up through their reading assessment last year that they took in ninth grade. Again, you're not going to see ninth grade math because we do not use the math assessment in grade 9. Really, when we look at these charts over the next few slides, what we're looking for is to see those lines. The darker ones are the cohort's performance, and the lighter of the same color is the trend line. So we're really hoping that it follows the trend line, meaning that it's going up and to the right, so that that's showing growth across the years. And so you can see that we are showing that growth across the years. It's that ninth grade, the reading, right, that sometimes is a little bit closer, so the slant may not be as significant. But this is our current 10th grade class. And then if we go to the next slide, the class of 2028 is our current ninth graders. And so we see their results all the way from second grade up through eighth grade. Again, the steeper the line in the darker color is our student results. The steeper the line, the more growth they made in that academic year. And then the next one, thanks to the class of 2029, is our current eighth graders. So you see their results from second grade through seventh grade. The class of 2030 is our current seventh graders. So these are students that were in second grade during the 1920 school year when we did not do our spring assessment. So we can't give full growth, but we can, so they're starting third grade, moving up. The next one, class of 2031, is our current sixth graders. And what I like as we start to go to our lower grades and our elementary grades is that you are starting to see that red line from the math start to get a little bit steeper, and that's because we're making those significant gains in the math, which is really nice. The next slide, class of 32, is our fifth graders. So they have 3 years worth of data for us to be looking at. Our fourth graders have 2 years, their second and third grade years for us to be looking at. And then finally, we have our current third graders that only have the one dot because they have that 1 point of data. But based on what we see from the other classes, the trend that we will likely see is for an upwards progress movement for those students next year. So we anticipate seeing that. So that's all of our data, right? And we're looking at it global view. And I look at it specifically for how is our programming working, right? Do we need changes? What are the gaps that we're seeing? Whereas our educators look at it at a very granular level and at a student level. And that's kind of what's nice about Math Growth is that it has that capability to be able to be looked at and examined and really analyzed at many different levels. So typically I would never put this many words on a slide. It goes against like a lot of what we know about slides. However, I wanted to give voice to our educators. So every year I tell you, that we use math growth assessment data to inform our instruction. And so this year, knowing that we really want to dig into this, I've sent out and sought some feedback from our educators of how do you in your classroom use this data? And the replies were so good that I wanted to give them space. So I'm not going to read them all to you. However, I do want to point out there's some commonalities, right? A lot of when you're reading this, you'll see that a lot of our educators use the data to create small groups to target specific skills. They'll use it to create win groups. They'll use it to create intervention groups. They'll use it to determine actually what intervention is needed and potentially how frequently that intervention is needed based on where the student's level is on that specific skills. They will also use it to rework their lessons. So if they see that if there is a target area their entire class needs support with, they're going to relook at that lesson and ensure it's accessible to the students to really help with it. Our educators also use it to simply identify strengths and areas of the need, but then also to identify who's ready for more, right? So a lot of times we ensure that our students that are needing intervention, needing to fill those gaps are going to be supported, but we also want to challenge our students who are ready for more of a challenge. And so making sure that that is also looked at and examined. And then on the next slide, I couldn't help myself. They gave such good responses. So, and you can see that the thoughtfulness that they put into using this data, right? The first one to me is like true educator fashion. Not only is math growth and assessment to assess those actual skills, but then it's used for more, right? It's used for, let's have a conversation about your academic stamina. Let's have a conversation about you taking those academic risks. If you don't know the answer, we're going to try, like go for it. Just try it out and see what you think. Applying different strategies, talking about metacognition. And so what's interesting about math growth that we see the educator runs the test session on their device, and you can see how long a student is taking the assessment. So we can see a student finish the assessment in 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, right? And the platform will also notify you if a student just happens to be kind of clicking through because they're just don't feel like taking the assessment that day. It pauses them, it tells the teacher, hey, fast clicking is happening, right? And so then the teachers are able to then have conversations about what's going on, right? And so they're able to talk about, is it a stamina issue or is it, you don't know what you're answering and so you're just going for it, right? And so being able to have these conversations academically, not only about the content, but about how they are learning and how they tackle an assessment. Also, just to highlight a couple other things here, we think about as educators, and it feels like in the past, right, we've had early literacy screener that's been put on the plate. There seems to be the MCAS in grade 8, civics, right, is now on the plate. And so the amount of assessments are on people's minds. And I think it's important to bring that up and just to put that out there, right, that is something that we think about because when we're assessing a student, can they learn through assessment? Absolutely. Is it the number one way that we want our students to be learning? That's a question, right? That is something to consider. And so we know that that is on our educators' minds. And the last thing to highlight is that the math growth report and the scores that we receive are a great tool to use as a conversation starter, not only with the students, but also with parents and guardians when they come in for conferences, when an email comes across with a concern, we have a data point that we can go to and say, oh no, actually look, we see this gap here, we should do this, or we see this strength here. So it's just a good conversation starter or continuation of conversation. So the next slide shows some of our takeaways. And I think the number one takeaway for me, and certainly in preparing, well, there were several, but one that I really want to emphasize is the thoughtful consideration and use of math growth data that our educators have when it comes to this. It's not just they do it and they move on. They're really reflecting, looking at that data and adjusting their lessons in order to make the best educational experience for our students. And so I appreciate their effort and their feedback there. We are consistently, as I said, we're consistently above the national norms in both reading and math. Our students are seeing success, as we said earlier, with the new K-5 math curriculum, which is really great. So that's a very big positive that we are seeing out of this data. With regard specifically to the math, 6 out of 7 of our grade levels saw higher observed growth in math in comparison to last school year. And 5 out of 7 grade levels saw their highest observed growth in 1 year, which is very, very impressive. Another takeaway, and this is in comparison, we can do a little comparison here to last year, is that this year in math, and this is all of our students that took math all together, 83% of our students were at or above grade level mean grit. And that's the national norm is what we're talking about when I say the grade level mean grit. So 83% of our students were at or above it. Last year, we had 74% of our students. So that's a good jump from 74 to 83%. With regards to reading, we had 78% of our students at or above grade level mean grit. Last year, that number was 75%, so an increase there, which is great. With regards to the low average and above, so you can see the colored bars here. We had 94% of our students this year in the low average to above in percentiles, which is really wonderful. And in reading, again, 94% in the low average to above and above there. Last year, we were at 93% for both of those numbers. So going up a percentage there. A big takeaway for me looking at this, right, thinking about programming and curriculum is that we are going to continue focusing on math because we have seen the gains and we don't want to put that to the wayside and forget about those gains and just not try and continue making those gains. So our focus is continuing on math in K-5. And then in 6 to 12, our math curriculum, our math department is actually doing a curriculum review this year for grades 6 to 12. So it'll be interesting to see how that review ends up and then future math growth data based on that, particularly in the middle school. With that being said, we are shifting our focus to the reading. And so we had last year completed the K-5 reading curriculum review. We did decide to make a change, which is a completely different change. We've already highlighted a little bit. I'm happy to come back and provide more information with regards to the new curriculum, which is it's a knowledge building curriculum. We concept as to where we were with regards to teaching reading. But it doesn't incorporate the whole idea behind a knowledge building curriculum is that you incorporate content into the lessons so that students have knowledge, more knowledge, meaning that they're going to be able to read and comprehend more as you move on, as opposed to previously where we really focused on the skills built within, right, of being able to identify who are the main characters, what's the topic substance, right, what's the main idea. Now we're not only, yes, are we talking about those things? Yes, but we're talking about them in connection to what the actual content of the material is. And so like Kelly says, we've seen changes already. Going in and seeing, you know, today just seeing second graders talk about the impact of weather and finding evidence, and they're using this language. It's not right like the teacher driving, they teach the vocabulary, right? But then students are using it organically in the discussions. I have goosebumps. So it's quite impressive to see it happening. So it's really wonderful. So we are making some turns to focusing on our reading at this point. But we're happy overall with the way the math growth results came out this year. We look forward to seeing more adjustments with the changes that we're making. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. We'll open it up for questions, comments, praise, feedback.
And I think this is awesome. I was looking at when you get the individual information back, because I have a very vivid imagination, I can picture some of the kids I've known with really interesting results. Does that stress our instructional capability? What kind of resources do we have, and do we need more resources to answer to these skills and skill differences we're seeing?
General answer, no.
Okay.
We have really wonderful resources, and we have, our most amazing is our staff, our educators, and their ability to take the data, take the information, and then provide lessons to support and target the specific individuals is really huge. And so a few of our responses come from individuals that are within the special education department. And so they, in particular, which is probably no shock to Lynn, really loved this data and being able to dig into it and find those gaps to be able to support the students. And then the materials that they might use the materials that the rest of the class is using, but they're using it in a different way, right? In some cases, they're using other materials that the tier 1 instruction is not using, that the class is not using, because that's what that student needs. So at this point, I think we do have our educators certainly have the capacity, and at this point, the actual materials to provide the support. And sometimes if students results are super abnormal, that gets dug into because there might be other reasons for that too. Right? So,
Thank you.
Nice. I'm just so glad the district invested in this. I just feel like it's such a game changer for getting data to inform instruction rather than an impasse, which comes so late that you really can't help individual students with it. But I remember when you presented on this last year, and my first thought was, all this data is great, but how does it inform instruction? And so I'm so glad that you sent the survey out to teachers, because that long list of different ways that they use the data is, I mean, it speaks to the power of the data and also the skill level of your teachers. And it looks like they're really integrating this into their UDL strategies. So that's fantastic. I feel like this is such an important piece of the whole program, to be able to track individual growth and growth of the cohort. And I'm really interested to see the impact of the new reading program. I did have a question for you, like back when you were talking about the norms, do you have any thoughts about why even nationally the math norm is higher than the reading norm? Does NWEA opine on that, or it's so interesting that it's so much higher?
Yeah, and they don't. No, they don't. So I think one, if I might, the very varied difference in access to math learning versus reading learning might be part of it, but they have not gone into, and it'll be interesting to see, quite honestly, come the 2025, if they choose to renorm, what that looks like, and if that actually comes a little bit closer together.
And if they renorm, do we have to renorm too, or could we? I'm just thinking, like, if you change the norms, then you lose all this nice longitudinal data because you're changing.
So I think it's something we would compare to the new norms, because those are the most up to date, right? We could, on the back end, do a little bit of, if we were to still be under the 2020 norms, this is what our results would look like in comparison, which, not to go too far ahead of ourselves, is a little bit what we'll see with MCAS, actually, because they have changed the CD for MCAS. And so we will have that conversation when we talk about our MCAS data of, we're forced because the state is moving in a certain direction with the CD. But if we were to compare ourselves against what the students last year had to achieve, this is what it would look like, right? So it'll be a similar kind of situation that, yes, if they change, we will compare ourselves to the new norms. But I certainly, for the sake of longitudinal, would do a little bit of looking at in comparison to previous.
And it's also, to hold ourselves to high standards. If they bring the norms down.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be serving our purposes, but. they might, I mean, to use the program at all, they might force you to use the current ones, but.
Right.
But anyway, this is so impressive. Thank you again and for making such an engaging presentation. Love your slide.
Oh, thank you. Bright and colorful as
Yeah,
people that walked
yeah.
into my office as I was working on it commented. But one thing, Elaine, that you mentioned the reading program, and I too look forward to seeing the results of it. It's always interesting that particularly with regards to knowledge building curriculum, most will say that it takes a little bit longer to see results. And so with math, I think we saw really fast, it even surprised us and our educators how quickly the results turned around for us. And so it'll be interesting to see when reading results kind of hit the big picture. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
I just want to say you always do such a beautiful job presenting this kind of complex data. So thank you. I very much appreciate you kind of like simplifying for us and giving us the comparison from last year. So it's really, really helpful. And echo what Elaine said. It was wonderful to, like, for you to like kind of dig deep into the details of how the educators are using it. I think that was really helpful to like kind of really get at the meat of why we're doing this. So this is great.
Thank you.
Bino? Anything? I don't want to put you on the spot, but don't want to give you an opportunity.
No, I'm here. Beth, thank you so much. That was a lot of information, but totally digestible the way you sort of explained it and laid it out. So really appreciate that. And I to sort of echo Elaine in your comments of I'm really interested about the ELA curriculum and how that continues to evolve. And I know, I don't know if you have any thoughts on, I know that the state really has this focus and priority right now on literacy and ELA. And so I don't know if that sort of intersects with how you're thinking about it, but I think it's just something that will evolve over time. So really appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Manal. I think it is the state, a lot of districts are having a change and a push with regards to literacy and literacy education. And the state is doing it at the same time. And so it kind of feels like it's coming from every angle, which just kind of affirms the fact of we're headed in the right direction of making these updates, not only based on our own data, right, but the state is seeing this as a way to move forward. And the state is promoting high quality instructional materials. HQIM is how they constantly refer to it. And there is a network that is offered through DESE that supports districts to go through a curriculum review process. And last year we had a committee of individuals come together to do the curriculum review, but then we had a leadership group within that committee that attended those network meetings. And so learning from DESE with regards to what does a high quality instructional material in literacy look like? What does that mean? And so it has been helpful and convenient, that there is the push from DESE with excuse me, with regards to literacy right now.
And is the Wit and Wisdom program, does that qualify as HQIM to DESE?
Yes. Yes.
I just had one question, but before I ask my question, I just want to say I think it's wise that the districts invest in this. I think it's a great tool. Gotten comfortable with seeing this presentation over the years. I'm happy to post-pandemic, everyone had concerns, right? And thank you for sharing with us the data on so that the catch up that's been made. I think we're there at the threshold, which is a terrific achievement. My question was all these wonderful takeaways from the staff. Does the district align a professional development day on the tail of receiving the math data, or do the grade levels have before or after school grade level planning sessions so that they can share best practices? Is there perhaps like a report that needs to be turned in to say, hey, these are the results for my students and these are the things that I'm doing for my classroom? Or is every teacher just left to receive the data and kind of make their own adjustments or changes? Now, what's happening is wonderful, but I'm just wondering if there's some consistency across the staff in terms of what the strategies are.
So when math was first brought in many years ago, the PD was provided at that point, right? So there was this consistency of how you look at it. That is an area that we need to revisit. It is teacher by teacher, somewhat organic as to how they look at their results. What's unique, middle school, right, is a lot of singletons, and because we have one teacher teaching all of seventh grade now, right? So they can converse with the grade 6 and the grade 8, right? So it's departmental.
Sure.
There is not a PD that lines up with once it ends. That would be amazing, quite honestly. If we could create a PD after we do an assessment like this to really dive into the data, there's not enough time in a school year to make that happen, right? So we have created other opportunities for that to happen. So for example, there are data meetings once a month, and at the appropriate time after a map is done, the data meeting can be used to look at this and to look at it not only by classroom, but by grade level. And so, for example, we have 2 interventionists at Russell Street who dive into this data and will support the grade level teachers to say, hey, look, grade 3, this is what we're looking at, and can get down to the classroom level with teachers.
Right.
And so there is a somewhat common practice, but long answer to say, yes, there is a somewhat common practice. I think it needs to be revisited.
Sure.
Like anything, right? We need to revisit how we do things.
Right.
When it's been so long.
So I didn't know the answer to the question. I think that'd be great because I do think the staff is obviously so busy running their regular classroom and they're trying to think days ahead, and then they get this dumped on their lap and they're like, what do I do now?
Right.
There's only so much time in a day. So if we, as a district, if we could carve out a dedicated time for them to zero in on this and not have to worry about what the lessons plans are for the next day and the tests coming up and the homework that needs to be returned and all that stuff, that would be great.
I agree. We'll consider what options.
Awesome. Yes. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job.
No, Jason's not here either, right?
He'll be proud.
Next up, next up, we'll hear about advanced placement testing. So you're not listed, but
Thanks.
Principal John Harrington will share some information with us.
I also appreciate the impressive presentation. I was taking down some notes and from what you said, but also what Beth said in terms of how we can follow up our own assessment data at the high school. That's not map testing, but there's just a lot of great ideas and suggestions, and those very deep, it was incredibly detailed, thorough. A lot of us, we can learn a lot from what our elementary and middle school colleagues are doing. So with that said, we kick off another presentation about assessment data, and really great results to report this year. And you've had a chance to look at it in the packet. We start off as we traditionally do with our list of AP courses currently at the high school or that were offered this past year. And you can see that some of them are no longer running. There's some staff changes. And we also generally we run APR history every other year. That teacher does teaching a different course. And that's sort of a nice cycle for us. That's been a tradition at the high school to do that. So students do get multiple opportunities to take it. With that said, we'll go to the next slide. So subjects where students took the 2024, I should say. That's not the effect. So this was in May of 2024. Here, you can just take a look at that. And you'll see that some of these courses, where student course exams were in areas where we don't have an AP course. We don't no longer teach AP Latin or AP French. Our language department has gone to a proficiency model based on syllabi literacy, and they've even changed the descriptions of the courses and the names of the courses. And that seems to work quite well for us. Our students do often take advanced exams, and some of them go out of their way. They're thoroughly prepared by our teachers to study for this exam, prepare for this exam, and a lot of them do sit for it, but we don't necessarily offer those courses anymore in the language area. And a lot of students are very self-directed and motivated, and they'll study on their own, or they'll enroll in online courses, and and take an exam. It's always impressive to hear about that, when students continue to push themselves. So students are really stretching themselves in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. And you can see on the next slide where our participation is growing, the number of exams taken, the number of students taking the exams. Next slide, please. And you'll see this in a couple of different formats. This table will show you that we had a lot of 4s and 5s really stand out this year. It's just taking a minute to open this one to pause and look at that. See if we can pause any questions too. But really strong performance this year. Next slide, please.
So if you don't mind, like,
Go back.
just because we're digging into data,
Yeah.
slicing and dicing stuff so many different ways, I just thought of this, like,
Yeah,
the results are phenomenal, but you need a 3 or above to earn the credit.
that's
So-
generally considered the standard, yeah.
Yeah,
For
so
college
do
students.
we look
And
at,
some colleges don't, even if you get a 3 or a 4, they don't grant you credit. They want you to take their physics class. We
Sure.
talked about that in past years.
might
But
have to do?
But generally, yeah, that's the milestone, that's considered
Yeah.
that is the target score for students, our students.
3 or above.
Trying to get a 4 because they want to increase their potential to have a college honor the credit. And it does stand out, these results published after the college admissions process for our seniors, but it does, a lot of our juniors and sophomores now are taking AP exams and putting their results in their college application, or noting it in their college application packets.
So do we have the data on the 19 and the 7 exams that scored a 2 and a 1? Like, do we look at that to say,
Yeah, each.
a chunk of this came from X test and it's not offered?
Oh, yeah, we can
Like,
break that all down,
Yeah.
and we don't, because the numbers tend to be smaller, we don't present that publicly, but each teacher gets an instructional planning report
Mhm.
from the college board, where it breaks everything down in detail. There's a lot of different ways that you can formulate, specific reports that are very insightful. And generally, a lot of our teachers are not surprised that the 2s and the 1s.
Sure.
Because they felt like the student really wanted to take the course, wanted the experience. We've said this in previous
Scratching,
presentations.
reaching, yeah.
Wanted to be challenged by the rigor of the course, see what it's like, even though they weren't the strongest student, perhaps they hadn't taken honors courses, but they were in college preparatory courses. But they stretched themselves and took that 1 AP or there's some kids that took too many.
Right.
And they weren't able to manage it all.
Mhm.
Most of the students who tend to really push themselves to take lots of APs tend to do really well, but I say this every year, we caution them around that. You can go back and run previous presentations this time of year, and I've said, it's like the same thing, we talk about student stress and, trying to, and we haven't imposed a limit necessarily, but we do counsel and guide students when we think they're overreaching and taking too many courses that are just, just unmanageable. We're starting to see a few real precocious students trying to take courses outside of what we offer, like I mentioned, and studying them on their own, and, they're, it's not, it's beyond, you say we have 7 teaching blocks, right, over the course of the week. It would be an 8th or 9th block, and we don't consider that well balanced.
Mm. Okay.
Next slide, please. All right, so you can see this one. So the bigger for 2024. You can see the comparisons across years here. We have tables of this going all the way back since I arrived in 2009, tracking this data. And, it's been very impressive for me as a principal, but also for the staff, the school community to see the progress over time. There's always going to be dips here and there for different reasons. This 2024, this May 2024 was really, really spectacular results. Slide, please. And then you just see that in a different graph form, visual form. That you just take a look at. Shows the high performance shown in the previous table. Next slide, please. Actually, just go back for a second, because I think you can see. Just take a look at the 2024s in the darker blue there,
Mhm.
and you can really see the 4s and the 5s really stand out visually compared to previous years. Next slide. All right. And the number and percentage of students with 1 or more scores, really high percentage. It depends on the report I was looking at from the college board, whether it said 91% or 90%. for this particular statistic, it was 90, they calculated it's 91%. Next slide, please. AP scholars, and we have, you can take a look at the definitions there. The next slide will show you a table with just the number of scholars, and you'll see considerable growth. Slide. There you go. And you see, wow. And that's a lot of kids taking AP courses. And individual students taking lots of AP courses. That's reflective of, but not only taking them, but performing really well.
We had 12 students take 5 or more exams in our career hard.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a culture at the high school where kids expect that they should take
Yeah.
AP courses?
I think it's, yeah, I mean, it's fed by all kinds of things, you know. Sometimes it's parental pressure or expectations, and peer to peer. You can comment on this for Cal, actually. You probably know, you may have something to say about this, but you know that the students talk it up. They want to have, they know that having a rigorous course load show up in your college transcript is a major factor for college admissions. And if they come from a high achieving high school and you perform really well, it really helps you in the admissions process. Okay?
Yeah, and there's really supportive classrooms and there's a good competitive nature around the classrooms. I took a few of the exams last year myself, and we all push each other in a healthy way to try and do our best in these exams and take more classes, and we're there to support. So it really is a great environment, and in my opinion, a very healthy one to be in. So it's nice to be surrounded by those types.
That's really great to hear.
Thanks.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What a commercial.
Great.
Here we go. So summary of the notes, and I have a couple of anecdotes that actually I think will resonate with Raquel's comments from individual teachers. I wanted to give you the quantitative data, but I asked some teachers just to share some comments and observations that I'll share with you by video. But you can see the summary here, and 90% of students scored at least a 3 on one exam. So we have a lot to be proud of. That's great for a small high school. And 61% of the graduating class scored a 3 or higher on the exam at least once. So that's a high participation rate for a class of 173 kids. Last year, 183 exams were scored 4 or 5. That was a real standard this past year. And we are this coming year we have our AP psychology teacher is back from leave, parental leave, and she will be offering to teach in 2 sections this year. AP macroeconomics has returned this year as a really growing and popular DECA club, business club that's taken off at the high school. And like I mentioned earlier, the program which has shifted away from AP. And 50 students, this is worth commenting, you might not know about this, 50 students take work for AP courses through VHS. So that's they have access to lots of courses we don't have staff for. And 44 of those students took it through something called the AP STEM Access Expansion Opportunity Grant. That's what that acronym stands for. STEM Access Expansion Opportunity Grant. And all these AP STEM courses that these students took, they're all offered online free of charge.
And so if they do that, do you give them high school credit so it's not an add-on to their schedule? Like,
Yeah, as long as it's within, it's not exceeding what we, the allowance of 30 credits or 70 courses.
put it like, say if a student's, is macroeconomics in the social studies department?
Yeah.
Yeah, so would that count as a social studies course, or would that be an add-on to the social studies course in the regular
It counts.
schedule?
Yeah, it could take the place of.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it can actually supplant, some of them, will supplement, though, they'll add it onto, they take basic history ourselves, but then they also take AP macro online. We see a lot of kids go register for online courses through VHS because of scheduling conflicts. And it's really helpful, to get around that. That AP course they really want, there's only one section of it that conflicts with their AP calculus. It's in humanities, right? In science, and it conflicts with the math course. They go in engineering, they need that course. And they want this is Elmore as their teacher.
Yeah.
So if I could just share, just to wrap it up, a couple of comments from teachers that I I'll read to you from AP Art had an amazing year. So I wanted to share some comments from Emily Hospital. And so this is directly from her, so I'll do a little excerpt from her. Last year, I'll pretend to be Emily. I had a very impressive group of dedicated scholars and artists who worked well together to tackle both AP classes. Students did very well on the AP Art History and AP Art Design exams, with all students passing and the majority receiving a score of 5. AP Art History students also got to apply their knowledge during an LEF sponsored field trip to the MFA, Museum of Fine Arts. One of the AP 2D design students, Nadia Pavlov, received the National Scholastic Art Award for one of her works and had a solo exhibit of her portfolio at the Woodward Library. So if you didn't know that, her work was on display. The AP US, phenomenal teacher there, Bill Maskinnis, who's been with us one, right? He's one of my first teachers I hired here. Every student who completed the AP US history course at LHS earned a 4 or 5. I wanted you to know that. And that's the reason why he's so popular. He's also got a dry sense of humor. Kids just seem to respond to him really well. AP Lit, we have a new teacher there in the last couple of years, Mrs. Kate McCook. She was also last year's senior class advisor along with Mrs. Curran. And she wanted you to know that she believes most LHS students who are interested in literature and apply themselves in honors classes, and sometimes the college prep courses preceding an AP class, are set up for success in AP Lit. Most students enter the class with the skills to earn at least a 3 or a 4. My goal is to move the needle, she says, for all students, but especially for those in the 3 range. Getting a student who would likely earn at 2 or 3 at the beginning of the year to score actually a 4 at the end of the year demonstrates a lot of effort and growth. Mrs. McCook, I want to add just to my own compliments to her, offering lots of support for students who are willing to push themselves and put in the work. Her caring and encouraging approach has really bolstered enrollment big time in AP English Lit. So just wanted to share that. AP Stats, the last shout out, but this just came in this morning from Kate, from Laura Curran, the other co-advisor for last year's class. She's a very popular teacher of statistics and mathematics at the high school. 42 students took the AP Stats exam. 42 students at high school. That's a lot. 93% of them scored 3 or better. So it's nice to report this growing news. It's really exciting for high school and for. I want to, compliment our teaching staff as well as all the students who put so much work into.
Thank you for coming with those anecdotes. It's been great
Yeah,
tonight
I
to hear from the
a little bit of
teachers in both presentations.
Yeah.
Questions, concerns, comments? All good? All right, thanks so much.
John.
Lots to be proud of.
All right, next up, we have one order of new business, which is to review the financial policies working group discussion. We touched on this at our summer retreat over, I guess it was over the summer. There was a financial policies working group that was assembled. I sat on that committee. What this really was a document by which the town is looking to perform financial planning for its municipal government. So there's, in the event that, boards do change over, not in the event. So as boards change over, new folks show up. This is a piece of literature that can be passed along, and it gives you a roadmap as to how the town as a whole is going to put the budget together, pay for capital projects, handle debt schedule, all that good stuff. And of course, there's a section that relates directly to us. This is not our financial policy. We have our own as a school committee policy, but the select board and the finance committee did ask us to review this, make sure that we were good with the language, and then get back to them with a ratification, an agreement that we covered it and we accept it, and we don't have any issues. So I'll just kind of touch upon the highlighted information here, and we'll open it up for discussion and see what, if any, changes we would like to make. So the first section here just essentially says that the school department's the largest budget of the town. It's an extremely important component of the budgeting process. We should maintain a close working relationship with the select board and the finance committee, so that as they prepare the annual budget, they're well informed of what we believe our needs might be for that budgeted year. They want the budget data. So they're just essentially asking that when we make our presentation, The budget data is shown by DESI code. We'll show the actual spending for the 2 preceding fiscal years. We'll show the budget data for the preceding and current year requested budget data. We'll slice and dice that information into dollars and percentage variances, and we'll detail some explanation for any major variances such as new personnel, salary increases, new programs. We'll just footnote anything that seems to be an outlier, and I kind of love talking about the budget on the tail of the investment that we make into the district with math testing and those wonderful AP scores. So it's nice. Let's see. In addition, in addition to detailing the town's spending for the appropriation, the school department should provide a detailed report on its reserves and revolving funds. This is stuff that we've been doing, but there wasn't necessarily a document, or the document was dated. So we'll present as part of our budgetary process balances on our reserves and revolving funds for the preceding year, budget additions, withdrawals for the current year, as well as any additionals and withdrawals for the following budget year. This next piece here was interesting. School choice. The town recognizes that the school department has a revenue source outside of taxpayer dollars and other ancillary things, which is some students choose to opt into Littleton School District, largely because of some of the information we just shared this evening and how wonderful we are. Everyone can pat themselves on the back. They're asking us to maintain a minimum balance of 5% of our appropriation as an emergency reserves with a normal balance of about 10%. Currently, I would say we have about 10%, slightly north of 10%. Yep. So we're in good shape there. In some instances, those unanticipated expenditures may be of recurring nature, such as unbudgeted special education costs. It's a wise idea for us to have an emergency reserve account in the event that we get hit with some extraordinary expenses. The town would like us to be in a position to absorb those expenses, which is the whole reason why we've done this, put a plan together so that we can evaluate the need from those expenses and try to either go back to the town over a multi-period time frame and say, hey, look, we've got a situation here, so they don't have, it's not a huge bite at the apple all at once, or perhaps those expenses roll off as the situation changes. So we're in good shape there. Prepayment of expenses. Thought this was kind of interesting, but the school department does have the ability to prepay some expenses for the following year. They're asking us that if we have committed to any prepaid expenses to try to continue with that tradition to the best of our ability so that we don't get hit with a year where we end up with, they think it's double expenses, but I don't really think it is. It actually gives us 1 year buffer in the event that we had that.
Correct. Correct. And to be clear, the expenses are special ed out of district tuition expenses.
Right.
By law, that's what we can pay.
Right.
And there's rules about how much we can pay to what kind of out of district placement there is. So, and we follow all that.
So does this language sit right with you with the way we currently do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you feel that once these prepayments are made, it then becomes necessary for these prepayments to continue each year in order to fight spikes in the school appropriation from year to year? I'm not sure that's entirely true.
That's not the experience that we're having. What we're experiencing is the fact that we're able to prepay special ed expenses into the next year, help level out the spikes that we might get if a student moves in.
Correct.
Or something like that. So it actually helps level out our expenses and help us plan for the future year.
I think in the spirit of this, it's fine. Reasonable effort should be made by the school department to avoid these budget spikes, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Right.
Is this something that we're going to be voting on?
We're gonna acknowledge that we've received it and that we either can go back to them with an edit as it relates to something that we believe is material.
Well, maybe we should edit that paragraph to make it reflect the current reality.
Because we really haven't had any budget spikes.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that the word necessary. I get what they're trying to say here. In the spirit of it, if you continue to prepay an expense, make that your practice going forward to the best of your ability. But what we're really doing is if we run into a situation where expenses are extraordinary, we could not prepay
Correct.
and therefore just handle with those expenses in the current fiscal year. Now we'd be obligated to make that payment every year, so we would lose, we'd lose that buffer. We could try to chip away at it and earn it back over time, but
Yeah, we're not in a situation where because we're prepaying tuition expenses in one year, that it's forcing us to prepay in the subsequent years. We're not in that situation.
I mean, should we propose some alternative language then so that this confusion doesn't go forward?
we certainly could.
I think we maybe should.
I would just exercise caution with the line of how they specifically thinking. Yeah.
I feel like the language is just kind of an accounting. We'd like to see the same, we'd like to see the same kind of expenses year after year. As opposed to, if you're prepaying and then you stop prepaying for 2 years, then you start prepaying again, that's going to give us some numbers that don't make as much sense when they're side by side until you really dig in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of inserting a misconception though, the way, right? I mean, could we clear that up so that,
I think we need to wordsmith it because
Right.
it's indicative of, this is a fear that they have that's never happened. And it's really actually helping the town out because if we didn't do these things, we would have spikes in the decrease. So your bill rate would, instead of going like this, would be up and down. And we've successfully prevented that during the last 14 years. So I don't think they understand the complexity of all working parts. And so I think a rewording of that to get rid of spike.
We could just alter that second sentence to
Yes.
just read that. Prepayments
Will be made when, give me a better way of saying.
When
it really
practical.
makes sense.
Yeah,
When practical.
When practical.
Yeah, prepayments should be
Yeah.
made when practical.
Yeah,
In order to avoid spikes in the school appropriation from year to year. And sentence 1 and sentence 3 are fine.
I agree. That's
Yeah.
sentence 1 and sentence 3.
I mean, we could strike sentence 2 entirely, but that's
I
kind of
think that
the
we're
action
practical is
sentence.
also, I'm comfortable with that, but I don't like the spikes. And I think that the prepayment comes down to taking into account projections and trends and accounting all of that.
There are so many things that can cause
Complex.
spikes and
Yeah.
they're focusing on this one small point that's never been actualized. So I don't know, Justin, how you feel about taking the word spikes out. It's kind of certainly negative connotations.
Yeah, we can soften spikes and we're looking to remove the term necessary.
yeah,
Are we in agreement there?
Perfect.
prepayments will
Okay.
be made when it's practical.
When practical.
yeah, I mean, if this is a document with all 3 boards, we certainly have the right to change the wording.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And again, this is not our financial policy, but this is something that the select board and the finance committee could come to us and say, hey, we did this together. This is a way in which we'd like you to carry your business forward.
Mhm.
You don't seem to be doing this. What's the issue? Can we talk about it?
So I'd like to memorialize that at a meeting. And
When we
I
come
mean,
back?
Justin and I have had conversations about this and in the spirit of standardizing our practices, which we already done, I don't mind reducing them to writing in a document like this, but I want to make sure, and Justin's on the same wavelength I am, sure, that we don't determine the fate of future school committees with this document. So in other words, in a simplistic way of saying that anybody sitting around this table with a school committee member has a right to question this document and change it. Because it's not our policy. Right. And I just want to say that on camera, so that understanding is
Sure.
something that can
And-
be referred to.
I'll jump back. The intent of this is a working document.
Right.
So this is something that's going to get revisited annually as the town sees change. Financial policy should change with that. So this doesn't lock us in anything. It's more of a best practices guide for all boards in which you should run your business. So why don't we make note of that particular section? We can come back and edit the following meeting. The next section here is chapter 70 funds. This is the recommendation that we,
Well, I'll get it from the video.
yeah, okay. Yeah, we can actually vote, ratify it next meeting. This is the discussion. Chapter 70 funds, the town will notify the school department of any chapter 70 funds that are received in excess of the amount placed in the fiscal year budget document. The school committee and superintendent will create a recommendation for disbursement of these funds to the select board. This is a topic that we touched upon at our summer retreat. So during the budgetary process, a couple different ways that the town receives money. Chapter 70 funds is one of them. Has to do with enrollment figures, has to do with historical data, what the state believes the funding can be, and we have to estimate what we think the funding is going to be. We then receive the actual information, and then I've just recently been told that the actual deposit or check that's cut can be a little bit different than the information we receive later. So it's like, are you kidding?
No, they're not kidding.
Well, I believe the wording is subject to appropriation
Yeah,
in
right.
the language, and that's true with both circuit breaker and everything else.
So
So
the idea behind the town here across all departments is that budgets are set and budgets are final. And the town, as I believe all informed residents are aware, the town's in good shape because there's been some terrific financial planning and practices that's taken place over the years. We weren't asked for an override at last town meeting, as some other of our neighboring towns were. But we need to continue those practices so that we avoid overrides. The idea behind setting a budget and staying with that budget, what that does allow to happen is that in the event that the town receives any extra cash through any revenue source, it'll allow it to fall to the bottom line as free cash. It sits there, it gets certified at the following town meeting, and then the town has the ability to put those funds to use. So it was the financial policies working group's recommendation that in the event extra revenue was received, chapter 70 funds, that's exactly what would happen. The money wouldn't be turned back over to the school committee to spend in that current year. We would allow it to fall to free cash. It would be certified, and then it would become sort of general use funds here for the town. It's the language here is that the school department, the school committee would have an opportunity to present to the select board and the finance committee in the rare event that extra revenue is received through chapter 70 funds. We would have a recommendation for how those funds get spent. I think the idea behind that is like the capital project. It's a one-time revenue that happened above and beyond expectations. Therefore, we don't want to fold it into operational expenditures because those would continue year after year. That could get us into trouble. But as all departments do, everyone's got a laundry list of capital needs. Us being close to half the budget, have some extraordinary capital needs. I think we would just want to align a burning desire capital need with any money that might fall to the bottom line.
Are these, when they're talking about excess chapter 70 funds, is this the SOA money?
It does include SOA.
So is that the part that they're saying we don't know how much it is and it could come in after the budget's approved?
True. I mean, and typically when you budget, even without SOA, you always underestimate your revenue that you would receive from the state. Because you can't, once you vote your budget, you can't go back and ask for more money. So it's a conservative number. So for years, we've been putting in 25,000, 30,000 as an increase, knowing that we would receive those funds. But with the SOA coming into play, all of a sudden we had hundreds of thousands of dollars coming into our budget. And the trouble with SOA is it's like circuit breaker. You don't know how much you're going to get from year to year. And in 2027, it could dry up unless they vote on continuing on with SOA. So it's not something you would want to gamble on in terms of increasing our estimate from 30,000 to to 200,000, because if we ended up with 40,000, then we'd have a deficit before we even started to actualize our budget. So it's kind of tricky. And I mean, there's two schools of thought here. We ask for a certain amount of money, we agree on an amount of money, and that's our budget. And typically we cut. Last year we cut 250,000. But if you look at it from a different point of view, in terms of, we are able to do what we need to do. I mean, our data shows that we're being successful. Our staffing levels are adequate, so they can change in time, and that's when we will advocate for more staffing. So I feel comfortable, not being that prescriptive on that. I think my change in thought process was linked to the fact that it would be used for capital projects. And when I say that, I really want to emphasize school projects as well, because we have a $5 million roof that we need to have done. And we really don't have a savings account on the town side for that. And so we probably have to do it in sections, which is fine. I mean, my dream, I've actualized it in other districts when I was regional superintendent, is to pre-plan for these expenditures. I mean, we have a 10-year plan in the town. What I'd like to see as we move forward with something like this is, let's take a look at our expenditures through a 10-year period, even a 15-year period. We have the document that gives us life expectancy of various components of our schools, and let's try to start pre-planning so that we're not trying to figure out where we're going to get the money. And this is good fiscal planning, and I'm hoping that our going on board or coming on board with this is going to help with that process, because it is a little daunting that we have a $5 million project coming at the high school, and we really don't have anything saved at this point in time. And when Justin and I were talking about this, it's like anything else. If you don't take care of your roof and you start having leaks, you're going to have mold. And then that price is, and other damage, and that price is going to continue to go up. So it's just a prudent way to make sure that you're maintaining your buildings.
And doing it this way allows you to spend the SOA money. If it goes into free cash, then you can spend it in a different fiscal year.
Well, no, our SOA, we've incorporated into our budget already with the current budget that we have. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, we're doing what we need to do with SOA, and if we really needed something, we would have asked for it despite having SOA funding. So we've been fortunate to plan and vision and determine what we needed to meet our students' needs. So we've been successful at doing that. And then, as well as I do, that's our needs change, our demographics change. We just need to advocate for those funds. It doesn't have to be SOA funds, just more funding for the school department when needed. So I really feel and strongly about the fact that not just as a school department, but the town as a whole, if they can use this money to start planning ahead and not having to take out as much money in terms of a loan to do these projects, we'd be far better off as a town. So that's why I jumped on board with this whole concept.
Yeah. Because
we've been trying to do that for 14 years, and we were so much successful, but then other things come up, in new buildings, for example, and that squeezes the capital budget in terms of preventative maintenance. Right?
So when you met with the FinCom and the select board, were they amenable to the idea that the extra Chapter 70 funds would be set aside for the school district, or were they still talking about having it be part of the general fund?
So that conversation didn't happen at the select board finance committee level.
Okay.
All right, so it was.
I thought that's what was being referenced, like with the recommendations for disbursement. Is that a different thing?
Where?
Well,
that's our recommendations. That's
right.
Yeah.
So but you haven't had a chance to talk
so there's
about it.
Well, and I don't think it's an issue. I have had some conversations, but those were individual cup of coffee conversations. There's a common theme on this page, which is the school department's able to receive school choice funds, maintain a balance, have savings in the event that you run into, extraordinary expenses. And in the event that your, balances are in excess of what you believe your needs are, feel free to spend that money down for minor renovations, capital items, or if you don't have a place for it, stick it in school building stabilization fund for future school projects. What we're basically saying, asking the finance committee and the select board is to do the same thing with chapter 70 funds. So in the event that the town receives chapter 70 funds in excess of budgeted, those should then be turned over to the school building stabilization fund as well, because we're going to need them for capital projects. And then if I would just continue down, this is an ask of them or an ask of us. I was part of the group. Surplus appropriation amounts. So changes to anticipated expenditures may occur during the school year. As with all departments, the increased expenditures must be covered from the appropriated amounts. So in the event that your expenses are greater than thought, that is your problem to solve. In the event that a budget surplus may exist at the end of your fiscal year, the unspent money by the school department will be deposited into a school building stabilization fund. So this allows us to get ahead of future projects. Not substantially, because it's a brand new process, but if the town were to always borrow for every need that it had, we'd never get ahead. The project's going to cost X plus interest. And it would be better to, like you were just referencing, create a roadmap of what's coming down the pike and try to get ahead of it and try to pay for some of this out of savings. It's not unlike what everyone does in their household, right? Every time you need something, if you were to finance it, it doesn't get pretty. And then the last piece here is just open communication among the school department and the town is essential. And then they were, as they should be, select board and finance committee. While it is understood that the spending of the town's appropriation is at the sole discretion of the school committee, this open communication will enable the town to continue to provide an outstanding school system for our students without impacting other services for our residents. So both the select board and the finance committee realize that by statute, school committee is in charge of how the money gets spent. They're the ones that will make a recommendation or go through the total dollars. But they're just saying, let's stay in touch so we understand what your needs are and where the money all goes so that they can feel good about the amount of, and that's easy to do. All you have to do is watch our meetings.
True.
So, takeaways, just to try to summarize this, we're just going to address the prepayment of expenses situation, and then we're just going to look, my two takeaways, we're going to look to offer some language as it relates to chapter 70 funds so that in the event that the town received anything in addition to budgeted, that money would then also be deposited into a school building stabilization fund.
Perfect.
Yeah, just to backtrack a little bit and just a little bit more information about chapter 70 and why there might be a difference in budgeted versus actuals. When you look at the way the state budgets, right, the governor comes out with a budget, and then the Senate comes out, and then the House Appropriations. The state hasn't typically passed their budget until June, sometimes into July, when they pass. The town passes a budget in May, so the town has to make, right? So there's a timing difference. So the town uses the best information, usually based on the governor's budget about what chapter 70 is, and then all the other state legislative bodies get involved and adjust that up and down. So by law, any excess funds, by law, go to the town general fund. So these are town policies. There's no legal requirement for them to follow these policies if it's gonna be in contradiction to what that state law is. I would just want to be clear about that.
Sure. They would also need to vote, or the public would need to vote to establish a school building fund, stabilization fund.
All right, that has to go to a town
That
meeting.
has to go to a town meeting. So
Sure.
Oh, we don't already have one?
they have a capital
The capital
stabilization fund.
stabilization fund, but not,
They would need to create a school capital stabilization.
Which the document references, so I guess it's in the works. So with those, with that discussion and those two proposed revisions, we'll make those, include those in our packet next meeting. And ratify, so we can go back to them. I will bring those changes to the chairs of both so that they know it's coming, so that if we don't want to ratify something and then have them disagree with it and we go around in circles. So let's just try to take care of this next meeting.
Yeah.
Good.
I noticed there was something else, Kelly, that you had added under the budget data. It says KC addition. Is there any explanation needed for that, or was that just wordsmithing?
What I was looking for was an acknowledgement that we are receiving funds in excess of what we budget for chapter 70. And in an ideal world, and no world's ideal, it would have been nice for the school committee to have some input as to how those funds be used, but I don't think that's gonna fly. But and the reason for doing that is to not simply make sure that you exercise the authority you have as a school committee, but does the money always have to go into a stabilization fund, or is there a point in time where we might recommend as a school committee that maybe we're gonna recommend that money be used to reduce taxation levels for a user? But there's no choice. But again, that's not something I'm overly concerned about. I just don't like that one roll in and without. There's been come a point in time where it would. Yes, so shots.
Okay, all right, thanks for that clarification. Okay,
By putting money into our schools for future projects, you potentially eliminate the town having to go out and do a ride for a project or things like that. So in a way, it can help offset some taxes at a future time as well.
I mean, as a town, we should be really proud of the fact that we haven't had to go for that. We're a rarity at the point in time, and we position ourselves fairly well, and we just want to make sure that we all contribute to doing whatever we can to not end up in that position. And there are no
I
guarantees.
appreciate this effort to get on the same page with all three boards, because I think that's going to head off those problems where you have departments fighting against each other for funding. I mean, we've seen it happen in surrounding towns where
Yes.
things can get pretty ugly. So this is such a great step for transparency and not making assumptions.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that's happening.
Good.
And you came back before I had to
No, we
do
didn't.
anything with the agenda.
All right, so we will move on from new business, unless anyone else has any unscheduled new business they wish to share. No? Hearing none, we'll move on to our second opportunity for interested citizens. Is anybody with us this evening that would like to speak before the school committee? Now's your opportunity. Oh, boy. I mean, you don't have to. Your timing was such that I thought maybe you were here to talk to us.
Okay, so I thought I'd be here about an earlier, but I had some business.
Could you just state your name and your address for the record, please?
Bounce, 25 Juniper Road.
Thank you.
I've been a resident for 3 years. My daughters lived here for about 7 with their husband, and now my 2 granddaughters. So school and education is a great interest. I will also start by saying the volunteers as well as professionals in the room employed by the town of Littleton, I greatly appreciate everything that you do, because since my 3 years here, have started to become of the opinion that the public welcoming and acceptance of recommendations from volunteer committees often takes more work than is expected. MBTA, NACOG Orchard being 2 recent examples of controversial challenges that I'm not happy with the original outcome and think that great work and effort had to be done to get the town to understand the complexities, the nuances, and the challenges associated with those votes. And ultimately, I think they will get to the right solutions, although there's still work to be done. Having said that, I attend lots of meetings, and this is not one that I've ever attended before. So I'll just share that in some recent meetings I've attended, I've started to become, out of my MBTA, Nagai Orchard experience, quite concerned with regard to the upcoming Shaker Lane school decision. So I implore you to consider embracing perhaps the concepts that might be brought, and I don't know your respective positions on things, but somewhat of a devil's advocate perspective, because I think that if you don't embrace a devil's advocate, prepare yourself for a very, very challenging environment, then I fear outcome and I fear the complexities placed upon this town and all of you being the volunteers and the professionals that you are. So I come from that perspective, just wanted to share that because I fear continuation of problematic votes that lead to another year of problematic votes and turmoil. I hope for the best. And that's the spirit which I have those comments. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we don't have to roll that tape back a year from now and say.
But we do have listening meetings scheduled, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Over,
Yeah,
October
let's
16th.
roll through the subcommittee reports, and when we get to the Shaker Lane Building Committee update, we can talk about some of the things that are going on. So let's go through PMDC first, and we'll leave Shaker Lane out of that report if there's anything.
Yeah, Shaker Lane is part of that.
So, yeah, so does PMDC have anything to discuss other than Shaker Lane? No, it's okay. Budget Subcommittee, we reviewed the financial policies working document this evening. Gonna revisit some of that language. I'll check in with Chair of the Select Board and Chair of the Finance Committee and let them know how our discussion went. We'll look to resolve that, and
I will schedule some meetings coming up and get with some dates with you.
okay. When we do that, I'll have the previous year's presentation. We should all look at the previous year's presentation just to make sure that that information sort of matches the suggested format that was asked of us for the budget presentation. Okay. Policy Subcommittee.
Nothing to report?
Nothing to report. Okay. All right, Shaker Lane Building Committee update.
Shaker Lane, all right, so I think some of the probably the most important things to share is, so we have community meetings on October 16th and the 23rd, I believe at 7 p.m. at the police department for community input. Is that correct? So those are open to the public, for people to come in and discuss and be updated as to where we are in the project. We had a school committee building committee meeting on, what was it, September 19th. The big takeaway from that is actually, thank you for the transition, is we were able to kind of nominate a subcommittee for community outreach, which is their sole purpose will be for community education and input on the project throughout the length of the project. So that's going to be, what do we have? I think Janine, might potentially had some interest in joining it and helping with that.
Yes.
Kelly, I believe, is going to be on it. Michelle Kane's going to be on it, and Ryan Ferreira are going to be on that. So they'll be working with Studio G and Turner Townsend Healy on getting the best community outreach that we can to make sure that everyone is involved and educated as the best we can through the committee. So I think that our next meeting we have coming up.
Can I just jump on the community outreach?
What's that?
topic? Can I jump in on the community
Yeah,
outreach
yeah,
topic?
absolutely.
So, my brother lives in Situate. Situate's like 1 year ahead of us with a brand new elementary school. So they went to town meeting in May, and fortunate for them, it passed with resounding confidence. So I chatted with a Situate school committee member about, hey, what was the last year like? What'd you do? And I don't want to duplicate any efforts that are taking place in this outreach committee, but I just wanted to share these with you. So the first thing I'd like the school committee to do, or the outreach thing, is we got to get on everybody's agenda, all departments, all boards, not departments, all boards, like all citizen boards. And just make a presentation. And again, we don't know what we're doing yet because it's a MSBA program and there's a process and all that stuff, but I don't think there's such thing as sort of checking in too early with everybody. Just simply if you don't know, if you happen to be living under a rock, this is what's going on. We'll be back to share more information as it becomes available. Let's get all the questions up front and we'll get better at answering the questions as we go and we'll learn what the good questions are. So that's something that's going to take, like, we can divide and conquer that if we could all go to a couple. The other thing that they did or that they recommended and Kelly's in the process of trying to do was a tour of Shaker Lane for the finance committee and the select board. So we were thinking of offering a tour and, and all interested citizens, but certainly make sure that those folks get invited, probably offer something during the daytime so that those folks can see the school at its capacity, can watch the students transition between hallways, can see working spaces in the hallway, like, can just see what's really happening. And then recognizing that not everyone has flexibility during the daytime, we should probably also offer an evening look at the school. And it's not just the classrooms, let's go look at boilers, let's go look at some of the other aspects of the school that aren't necessarily student centric. And then the other thing was offering information sessions at the other schools as well. So, well, this is a Shaker Lane building. Doesn't hurt to have an information session at Russell Street at the middle school and the high school. And quite honestly, the attendance might be low. But you specifically target market those folks. Emails are going out. You know how best to get in touch with your families. We'd like your assistance in making presentations at some point in the future to those members of the community. And probably also specific outreach for senior citizens as well. So, they've got a building under construction. They've got a lively department there. I'm sure we can bring some information to them. And like I said, it's not a one and done. We've got about 13 months, 12 months to bring this to October 2025 meeting. So we should probably get going at some point in the near future. And feel free to offer ideas as we think of them. And let's try to get out in front of this the best we possibly can. And there's no personal agenda here. It's simply just sharing information, gathering feedback, and making sure that the process improves as we march towards that timeline for October. And I think our interested citizen was correct this evening that no matter how much information you try to put out, there's always going to be folks that show up at town meeting and say,
I've never heard of this.
I've never heard of this. I cannot believe we're considering this idea. So some of those folks maybe aren't engaged over the course of the year and they go to town meeting and they are surprised about what's going on. So we got to try to reach some of those folks. The earlier we can reach them, the better.
The part of that I really like, Jade, is going to where they are, like going to a COA event, meeting, something, working with a COA, and can we present where your people are already going to be, that kind of thing. And anything where people are already going to be that we could fit into.
Right.
Would be wonderful. One of the things that the library did is, third Thursdays, well, there were a couple of summers where third Thursdays were pretty well attended, and they had a table. And they had a couple different ideas of design. And they were talking it up. So one of the things that happened is when we did come around to, why are we hearing this for the first time? There were those of us who had seen that table and had been to another meeting who could stand up and say, excuse me, but we've witnessed the opposite of what you're claiming. So,
Sure.
So we've done the work, but I really like the idea of meeting people where they are.
Right.
Yeah.
And any board or committee is full of interested citizens who are volunteering. All we have to do is hop on their agenda. They're probably nice people who have friends and they can help us get the word out as well. So we can start, maybe you can bring those back to the outreach committee, or that can be a school committee initiative, not too sure. I don't feel super urgent about the concept of us getting out there, but I do feel like we need to start soon.
Stick it in. Yeah, we just.
I mean, I think,
work together.
I think we can work together. I think it's important that the school committee as a whole be involved in this process as well. I mean, that's, you know, one of the areas of responsibility that you have, and it does show the fact that you know what's going on, and you have the information that it's important that people know you have that information and share that information out. I don't see this as a separate communication committee and then the school committee. I think we're all together on this, trying to inform the public as best we can. So when we do get to that vote, that most of our citizens will understand our needs and also understand the potential costs. And as I said at our last meeting, this is really a community project. It's not just a school project, it's a community project. Yeah. I think that's an important phrase to use.
Right. And like I said, it's an evolving process because it's MSBA. It would be even worthwhile from us just to get the questions. We're going to get questions that we don't have the answers to just because that information's not available, because we got to go through the process. But if we could start accumulating the questions, that's what people want to know. So when that information becomes available, then we can get that information out. So anyways.
And the postcard that's being sent home to every residence gives an avenue for that as well.
Was being sent to students or is it just being sent?
Sent households.
All the households. Okay.
That's my understanding.
So Stacey, you touched on October 16th, 23rd. Those are hybrid meetings, but on the agenda, there's also October 2nd virtual only meeting as well for Schcmte Building.
Yes, yes, we have a meeting coming up, but is it next Wednesday? Agenda on that, we're gonna be actually voting a new chair. And then we are getting some updates from,
Some new news as of 1 o'clock today.
yes,
We will not be voting on a new chair. We've worked things out,
okay,
so we're good.
all right, so we will not be
Okay.
voting.
Sounds like you're missing drama.
Still having the meeting on October 2nd?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
and
okay.
it will be a planning meeting for the October 16th. And
Okay.
October
October 2nd, virtual only, October 16th and 23rd, hybrid options, Littleton Police Station, right here, or in the comfort of your home.
Yes.
All right. Is there any other subcommittee reports? No. Okay. All right. If there's no other subcommittee reports and no other new business before this, new or old business before the school committee, I'll announce that our next school committee meeting is October 10th, 7 p.m. right here at the Littleton Police Station. It's also a hybrid offering, so you can enjoy the presentations from the comfort of your home. But I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Oh,
And keynote, and also there's a quick CPAC update, if you could, we have a meeting coming up on the first.
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, oh, I didn't check my email, I'm sorry.
No worries, do you mind?
Yeah, do you want to just?
Before we adjourn?
No,
Yeah,
why don't you just, no, yeah, I mean, I've got it right here. Lynn, you know what? No one's gonna do it better than you.
Right.
Come to the podium, please.
Come on up.
Why am I gonna read your words when you can just,
Well, actually, CPAC's work,
all right.
and they did a beautiful job. So they are planning for, their first meeting of the 2024-2025 school year on Tuesday, October 1st at 7 p.m. at the Littleton Fire Station at 20 Foster Street. I will be there to provide SPED updates and, to introduce Margaret Deslitz, the new Student Services Liaison and out-of-district coordinator. John Kazanjian will also be there from Parks and Rec. He's going to be joining us to discuss Parks and Rec plans to add an adaptive sports program and wants to hear from families that would be interested in participating. CPAC will also go over draft plans for the year and welcome input and comments. And they ask everyone to bring ideas for programs and other suggestions. And if you can't attend the October 1st general meeting, they will be planning a parent social night in the fall. So keep an eye out for the date.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thank you. All right. Glad we had the extended pause there so you can slip that in. All right. If we're all good, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Are we trying?
Motion made by Stacy,
All set.
seconded by Janine. This will be a roll call vote. Dino?
Being all yes.
Dino votes yes. Stacy?
Stacy, yeah.
Janine,
Janine, yes.
Elaine,
Yes.
Justin McCarthy votes yes as well. We have adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.